Hello there, I'm Elwyn, this is Newt, and welcome to the Antler Crown and another edition of Famous Witches Through History. This particular subject is one of controversy. This character exhibits many fanatical and perhaps unstable attributes, and yet still a worthy mention for their notoriety at least. However, which they were labelled so, but I will leave you to decide that. Today we are going to be looking more into the life of Joanna Southcott, the prophetess of Devon. So come on in.
Beyond the weather and the marsh, there is a whisper in the dark through the tides of disarray, where a list unfollows the way. If you listen very still, there are answers to the end, where the ancient pulses deep of the memories you keep.
Joanna Southcott was born to a very religious family in 1750 in the town of Taleford, Devonshire, and raised in Gittisham. Her family ran a farm and she worked with the cows with her father until he passed when she was 12. Her father claimed to be a descendant from noble folk and had a somewhat misplaced sense of dignity that Joanna also shared. In her teens, Joanna's mother died, and Joanna said this about her mother's passing. My mother's death sank deep into my heart. Since that, I may say I have been desirous to live in the knowledge of the Lord. But to my shame I can reproach myself. I have forgotten him days without number, and I am an unworthy object of his loving kindness. Joanna was forced into the world far too young and had to get a job as a shop girl, and later on as a domestic servant in Exeter. Then, after that, an upholstering assistant. It is at this time she was propositioned by several suitors, but refused them all, being of the opinion that she was somewhat above all other mortals. She referred to her body as the Temple of Shiloh, Shiloh being the sanctuary from which the Ark of the Covenant was kept. She started her life in the Church of England, but moved to the Wesleyan Church, in which is a Methodist Christian denomination, in her early 20s. And on Easter Monday, 1792, at 42 years old, Joanna announced to a Bible class that she was sent from God to be the Lamb's wife, and he had chosen her as a messenger of his second coming, as noted in Revelations 12:1-6, which goes like this. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labour and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her for 1,260 days. The announcement was not received well by the parishioners, who cried shame and blasphemy until she fell into a fit on the floor. In her delusion, she was moved to the home of her sister and remained delirious for 10 days. When she awoke, her prophecies had begun. In the following years, she also began to deliver prophecies about the prospects of forthcoming harvest and the welfare of local dignitaries, including an Anglican bishop whose death she accurately foretold. The harvest predictions were often right too, leading some people to conclude that she was a witch, while others countered that she was blessed with divine foresight and was a protection against witchcraft. She certainly believed in the reality of witchcraft, and although she favoured the Bible over astrology, she did believe that planets could create a good or bad influence, and that there is a world in the moon, and that world within the moon is where Satan dwells. So, swings and roundabouts. In January of 1802, Joanna delivered her first sealed prophecies to a wealthy engraver, William Sharp. 3 Church of England rectors and 3 other gentlemen all found something within the prophecies that bore some relevance to them. At the end of the session, all 3 men had claimed that Joanna was a prophetess. She was moved to London, and twice more she gave prophecies to religious and rich men alike. Now she had a large following of Southcotians, who began opening chapels in her name. Southcott was popular among poor people because of her outspoken denunciation of rich landowners, who took advantage of popular hunger by hoarding grain until the prices rose during the economic upheavals of the French Revolutionary era. Speaking as God's mouthpiece at a time when such words risked prosecution from sedition, she declared that my charges will come heavy against them, and my judgment must be great in the land if they starve the poor in the midst of plenty. Sounds familiar now. Controversy ensues when people who were, or at least claimed to be associated with Southcott, began selling printed seals which supposedly would guarantee the owner entry into paradise after the apocalypse. Seating was limited to 1,000 or 144,000 persons, and therefore the seals were in high demand and sold for exorbitant prices. Southcott denied that she was profiting from the sale of these magic trinkets to heaven. Joanna published 65 books between 1801 and her death in 1814. Thousands of English men and women, rich and poor alike, followed her and believed in 1814 that she was about to give birth to the Messiah through a miraculous virgin birth and would name him Shiloh. She gave every sign of imminent maternity but died and was found to have had no more than a phantom pregnancy. She was the most famous millenarian prophet of her era and still has followers up to the present day, waiting for her sealed box of prophecies resting in the Panacea Museum in Bedford to be opened once again. In 1927, the box was sent to the National Laboratory of Physical Research, where researcher Harry Price x-rayed it, only to discover a horse pistol, a dice box, a purse, several books, a lottery ticket, and a nightcap. In my opinion, while Joanna was heavily influenced by the church, her own pious upbringing and possible mental delusions, her prophecies were accurate for those she read. Her notoriety was not feigned but tarnished by her fanatical behaviour in the church and by the wealthy men who were often the object of her outspoken disdain. I don't believe that men of that time wanted to trust women who spoke against them, especially ones who never received a formal education, never married, and didn't have children. But I'll leave the decision to you. Thank you for learning more about Joanna Southcott with me, and don't forget to check out my other platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Please consider joining my Patreon, where you get access to more unseen content and a Discord. or consider purchasing a reading from me of my website, theantleredcrown.com. Wherever you are, I wish you a blessed day. Goodbye.